All right, guys, it's August, which means there's a lot of matted vegetation on your lake or river, and I'm telling you, that's where the bass are at. This is where it's time to get in there and dig them out. You know, there's a bunch of activity going on underneath those matted grass areas. You know, you've got the zooplankton and microorganisms, and you've got little insects in there, and the bait fish are in there feeding on it, and the bass are in there feeding on the bait fish, and it's just going crazy in there. So how do you fish these matted grass? I mean, you can go to areas where it's just a huge amount of matted grass. Where do you begin? How do you do this? How do you fish it? Well, let's talk about that. First of all, you need the right gear. This is hand-to-hand combat, guys, so you need stout gear. With all that heavy matted vegetation, you've got to be able to dig those fish out. So a stout rod is what you got to begin with. 7'6", 7'8", or even longer. Heavy action, heavy power rod is what I'm talking about. It feels like you're holding a piece of rebar. I mean, these are stout rods. They really don't bend much, but that's what you need. That strength is what you got to have. You got to have strong braid on it too. 50 to 65 pound braid. Now, you've heard me say before, I like to use Seaguar braid, especially smackdown, but in this case, I like to use Tactics. Seaguar Tactics right here. The reason is that Seaguar Tactics, the edges on it are they're kind of serrated. They're really rough. It's like a sandpaper edge to them, which is going to cut through that grass a lot easier than the smoothness that the Smackdown has. So when I'm flipping and pitching into this heavy cover, that's what I'm using. The Tactics is a much better choice for that. As for the weights, you're going to use heavy weights. Minimum 3/4 ounce bullet sinkers. I like to use tungsten because it's more compact and it can get through the vegetation better, but you can go all the way up to half ounce, 1.5 ounce, sometimes 2. I mean, these are beefy. Look at this, man. This is the 3/4 ounce. This is the 1 ounce. These are big. This is not finesse tactics here. You're lobbing some heavy weights here, but you need that in order to punch through that vegetation and get to your bait down underneath it. And of course, you got to have a stout hook. You've got to have a strong flipping hook. They're designated as flipping hooks or superline hooks. They are really strong because now when you set the hook and you're fighting the fish, all that power is being delivered right to that hook, and it's got to be able to withstand the strengths of that. Otherwise, you can straighten out the hook or bend it, or you end up losing the fish. So use a flipping hook for this tactic for sure. Now you've got everything you need. The reel. The gear ratio doesn't matter as much. I go with a lower gear ratio because it's more like a winch, so like a 6:3 to 1. The more important part of it is the drag. I gotta have a drag that's more than 18 pounds of drag. 24 is best. Something that really winches it down. I lock it down so it's not even gonna move, so I can set the hook and get the fish moving my way. Typically, I don't even worry about the drag even moving. I don't want it to slip. When you're fighting these fish, you don't want to give them any chance of wrapping themselves around the weeds. So we'll talk about that in a second. But now you've got all that set up. Now the last thing is the bait. Now the bait is, you want a small compact bait, not something that's got a lot of appendages to it like a creature bait or a ribbon-tail worm, because that can hang up on the weeds as it punches through and you won't make it through all the way through the matted vegetation. So something that's a little more compact. I like to throw the beaver style baits like a rage bug. It's kind of got an arrow shape to it, and it's actually perfect because it punches through and makes itself a little hole as it goes through and falls down through, and it's got kind of a bluegill profile to it. And once it gets through underneath that matted canopy, it's game on. So how do you fish it? Where do you fish it? Well, when you're looking at a big vast amount of matted vegetation, the first thing you want to do here in August is that you want to be near deep water. So don't go all the way to the back of coves where I'm sure there's lots of matted vegetation, but the bass like to be near deeper water. So if you can find a patch of it that's near a big drop off or a major creek or near the main channel or the main lake, something like that, deep water nearby, I will skip the ones that are just all shallow area and go to the ones that are closer to deeper water first. Second, when you get to that matted vegetation, you want to look for areas that are like irregularities, like a point coming out of the vegetation or a cut or a little pocket, or maybe an area where it thins out a bit, indicating that the bottom composition has gotten a little bit harder, or maybe openings in the vegetation. That might indicate there's a rock there, a boulder or a stump or a laydown, and that's gonna attract the bass. Those are the things you wanna look for and you wanna cast to. As far as the technique is concerned, You just do a flip or a pitch. I like to pitch because I like to get it up in the air a little bit more. It gives it a little more velocity and get it down. And you want to land it on the vegetation. Now, hopefully it punches through and goes through. Now, if it doesn't, if it just lands on it, wiggle it a little bit, and sometimes it'll open up a little hole and it'll slide through. That's fine. However, if you're finding consistently where it's landing and it's not going through, or you have to jiggle it an awful lot to get it to go through, then you need to get a heavier weight. That's a great indication that you need to move up about 1/4 ounce, and that should do the trick. Once it gets through the bottom, through the canopy, let it fall all the way to the bottom. Now, sometimes that's when you get bit, is when it's falling. And it's hard to detect the bite because you're letting it fall on just, slack line. So you have to watch the line very carefully. Look for the line, watch the line to pop, jump, do a little bit of movement. Sometimes, say you're fishing in 5 feet of water and you're used to it taking about 5 seconds, 3 seconds for it to get to the bottom. And one time you make a cast and now it's going 5, 6, 7, 8, and the line's still going. Hey, something's got it and it's running off with it, man. Set the hook. So you got to pay close attention to just watching the line is critical to detecting those bites during its fall, during that slack line period. But once it hits the bottom, reel up on it and get some tension on it, and then just jiggle it a little bit. Sometimes a bass doesn't want to hit it on the fall, and instead, if it's on the bottom and it looks alive and a little bit of movement to it is all it needs, and they'll suck it right up. So give it a little bit of jiggle movement, let it rest, and then jiggle a little bit more and let it rest. If that doesn't work, you're still not getting bit, then what I like to do is called the yo-yo technique, where you lift it up off the bottom and let it fall. And you do it rapidly. This is a heavy weight, so it's a quick lift up and a quick fall. You're trying to elicit a reaction strike. So this isn't a slow moving presentation per se. It's pop it up and let it fall right back down, pop it up, let it fall right back down. And sometimes that elicits a bite. Now, those three generally are the main ways to catch them when you're flipping and pitching the matted vegetation. However, sometimes the bait fish, they're up under the canopy feeding off of those insects and invertebrate and zooplankton, and they're not on the bottom. And so the bass are up underneath the canopy too, feeding on the bait fish. And so you got your bait on the bottom, you're not near where the bass are. So reverse it. What I call is kind of a mirror image of the way you fish it. And it's exact same techniques I just told you, but instead you're using the bottom of the canopy like you would the bottom of the lake. So in this instance, sure, you let it punch through, but lift it up and get it to the bottom of the canopy and hold it there and jiggle it against the bottom of the canopy. And if that doesn't work, let it drop and lift it back up to the bottom of the canopy. That reverse yo-yo. It's a mirror image of what you were doing on the bottom of the lake. Now you're doing it using the bottom of the canopy as the bottom of the lake, if that makes sense, right? It's an inverse. And oftentimes when the bass are suspended up there or feeding on those bait fish underneath the canopy, that's how you catch them. Some guys, they'll pitch and flip all day long in the matted vegetation and not catch any fish, and that's because they're on the bottom when the fish are up underneath the canopy. So keep that in mind. A couple of things to think about now while you're doing this. Fishing these massive amounts of canopies and you're just flipping and pitching all day long can get monotonous. You've got to be on point, guys. The bite is often subtle and it's easy to miss if you're not paying attention. And you're going along the shoreline, you just boom, boom, casting, talking to your friend, listening to music or often thought, and next thing you know, you got a bite and you didn't even realize it. So staying on point and you got to keep that concentration up is probably one of the hardest things about this whole technique. The other thing you got to keep in mind is when you get a bite. Now, years ago, you've probably seen this on YouTube or on TV where these guys set the hook and they just reel back and they just, fighting the fish and they just, oh my gosh, I got a fish, and they go crazy. And they just hit them really hard. Well, with today's gear, you don't need that so much, right? You've got a really stout rod that barely moves, you've got braid that has no give whatsoever, and you're using a stout hook that's very sharp. The hooks these days are super, super sharp. It doesn't take a lot to set that hook. All that power when you set the hook is being driven at that hook point. So you don't need to hit them really hard. As a matter of fact, that can be detrimental. What you may end up doing is sometimes the fish takes the whole bait in his mouth, and that big tungsten weight is inside, and when you set the hook hard, it can blow his mouth open and blow the bait right out, and you never get the hook in him. So a hard hook set is detrimental. Another reason you don't want a hard hook set is you can actually rip the hook out of his face, or you can create a hole that's big enough that while you're fighting the fish back to the boat, or back to shoreline, that the hook will come out. So a hard hook set is actually not a good thing. However, you do want to get a good solid hook set and then reel, 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 reel. Don't give him any chance whatsoever. You want to turn his head towards you and get him to you. Don't give them a chance to turn, because if they turn, they can wrap around the weeds, and then now they got you. They can use that as leverage to wiggle free, and it's a lot harder to get them out. So get the head pointed to you and just keep cranking fast and get that rod tip up. If you can, get them up above the water. Get that mouth coming right at you. That's what you want to see, a mouthful of vegetation plowing through, coming right at you, and just reel, 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 reel. And that's the way you get them out of that cover, man. And it's a blast. It is so much fun to catch bass this way. In August, when it's blithering hot, you'd be surprised at how well this works, even though it's relatively shallow water. Hope that helps. For more tips and tricks like this, visit bassresource.com.